Hi, everyone. Welcome to Trevera Tip Tuesday. It has been a minute since we've done one of these, but we needed to bring them back because Google just rolled out something that they have been talking about for a long time. And it's impacting anyone who has a website, which means it's impacting everyone. So I am Christina Stetter. I'm the EVP here at Trevera. And this week, Ivana and I are talking about Web Core Vitals, the latest major algorithm update that Google has rolled out. And this is a big one. Ivana, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Ivana Skoko, and my role at Trevera is Search and Digital Advertising Strategy.
Thanks. So let's set the stage. Web Core Vitals is something we've been talking about in our Lunch and Learns for over a year now. And it just started rolling out last month, and it's going to impact your website. So Ivana and I want to remind you what the Web Core Vital update includes, how to check your vitals, and then give you some tips on things that you might be able to do to improve yours. So let's start at the very beginning. Ivana, can you explain what Web Core Vitals includes?
Sure. I am going to share my screen here. And while I'm doing that, we just want to mention that none of the stuff that we're going to talk about today is anything sort of that's groundbreaking or new. We've been talking about this for a while, as Christina mentioned, but it's just sort of building upon things that we already know are important. So if you can see my screen here, it starts with page experience metrics updates, and it's basically looking and measuring how things like website speed, responsiveness, and visual stability. So is your site mobile friendly? Do you have secure, safe browsing, HTTPS? Do you have any major pop-ups that are preventing main content from being read and accessed? And then layered on top of that, we have the Web Core Vitals, which includes 3 specific page and user experience measurements. So this is first LCP, which is how long it takes for your main content to load. FID, how long before the user can interact with that content. And then CLS is how much your content is moving around while things are loading.
Thanks, Ivana. So now that we know what Web Core Vitals are, let's talk about how you can improve yours. It's important to keep in mind that although Google has told us what they're measuring, which is really unusual, Google doesn't usually give us this much detail about an algorithm change. That's how we know it's significant. There's still a lot that we're figuring out. So we'll share with you what we're seeing with our clients right now and what we're reading about in all the SEO blogs, but we're all going to continue to learn more. So if you watch this webinar a couple of months from now, there might be some things that have changed. Now, I don't think we need to spend a lot of time today on the page experience metrics because by now you should all have a secure website, which means it has HTTPS at the beginning. You should be avoiding pop-ups unless they are legally required. I know marketers love pop-ups, but Google does not. And your site should be mobile friendly. Now, it's important to stress mobile friendly does not mean you can open your site on a phone. It means that the site changes its presentation to match the device. So if you open your site on your phone and it looks exactly the same as it does on your desktop and the buttons are, about that big, your site is not actually mobile friendly. So let's talk about the Web Core Vitals part because that's the new part. Ivana, what are we seeing in the early reviews of the websites?
The most significant issue that we're seeing seems to stem from that LCP or largest contentful paint. Which again just tracks the speed or time it takes for the main content on your page to load. So this includes stuff that every site has, right? It's images, background images, video thumbnails, it's text elements like paragraph tags and headings. So the 3 main areas that you can optimize here are slow servers, any render blocking, JavaScript or CSS, and slow resource load time. So typically applying fixes like caching, choosing a good hosting service, optimizing and compressing your images, and fixing any CSS and Java issues can help.
Yeah, the other 2 aspects to Web Core Vitals are also related to loading. That's why loading is so important because interactivity is dependent on load time. If your site takes a long time to load, obviously it takes a long time before someone can start to interact with the page. And visual stability also relates to load time, but it can be impacted by variable content. So if your site alters the content depending on who the user is, or if you show ads in the middle of your content, this will be more of an issue for you than if you have a site that gives the same presentation to every user. So really the thing to focus on is your load time. So Ivana, how can someone find out if they have page speed issues?
So there's a few different ways that you can measure and identify issues like this, and a few different ways that we use. You can use PageSpeed Insights. There's a Chrome Dev Tools. There's a Web Vitals extension that you can use, and there's even paid tools like SEMrush. But the one that we tend to start with is Google Search Console. If you're not familiar, it's a free tool from Google that just allows you to check your site indexing status. It'll identify any security or usability issues and then help you optimize for visibility. They actually have a new report on there that's called Core Web Vitals. So it makes it a little bit easier to help identify and evaluate any pages on your site that may need attention. One little thing to note here is that if you have a smaller site, it's not going to give you URLs or pages that are not meeting a minimum threshold of reporting data. And then it's also important to note here that they do separate it out by mobile and desktop separately. So you'll want to look at those separately, even though the issues you may be seeing are consistent across device.
Yeah, that mobile and desktop thing is super important. Remember, and we've talked about this before, Google evaluates the quality of your site based upon its mobile experience, even if most of your users come from a desktop. So if you're a B2B company and you don't get a lot of mobile visitors, you still need to make sure that your mobile performance is absolutely as good as you can get it, because that's what Google is using to determine how relevant your site is. So now you've got your report and you know what your issues are, you can start to fix them. Now, as Ivana mentioned, image size tends to be a problem for a lot of people. So here are a few things that you should know. First, if you're using JPEGs for your file images, don't place a full-size image in the site and make your website do the work to shrink it down to the size that the image appears on the page. So if your image is only 400 by 400, make the image smaller in a photo editor. If you're using Photoshop, you can also choose Save for Web, and then it will show you a variety of compression options. And so then you can choose the one that balances file size with image quality. Now, if you don't have Photoshop, or if you're using pings on your website, you can use an image compression tool like TinyPing to minimize your file size. Now, unfortunately, this does mean that if you have image size issues, you would have to go through your website one file at a time and update all your files. And that could be a beastly task if you were not in the habit of doing this right in the first place, and if you have a large website or a lot of images. But just look at it like exercise or taking medicine. You just have to pound it out. All right, so what else can you do, Ivana?
The other thing that you can do, honestly, is, especially for some of the technical issues, is work with a developer, because they're going to understand some of that CSS Java language and can potentially remove or minimize and reduce easier than you can, so that your pages and site are better performing and more accessible.
Yeah, and if you don't have a developer that you regularly work with, this might not be, unfortunately, something that you can do. Now, that's not a great situation, but just to keep things in perspective, like everything with Google, there are plenty of contradictions. For example, we know that speed matters, but it's not the only thing. I found a quote from a recent Q&A with Google's John Miller, and what he said was, we still require that relevance is something that should be kind of available on the site. It should make sense for us to show the site in the search results, because as you can imagine, a really fast website might be one that's completely empty, but that's not very useful for users. So Google does understand that there needs to be a balance between what you as a searcher are looking for and the site that they send you. So the fastest site in the world doesn't necessarily mean it's the best. There are lots of other ranking factors. Google says that the goal is to provide a better user experience, so user experience metrics matter. Keep working on providing your users with what they need by measuring things like bounce rate, time on page or time on site, and having the content match the intent of the query. Search is a lot more complicated than it used to be. So if you want to learn more about that, because it's changed a lot, even just in the last couple of years, visit Trevera.com, go to the resources section, and check out our Google Secrets webinar. We have 45 minutes where we explain an awful lot of stuff about search.
And just to kind of reiterate what Christina was just talking about, it's important not to just get hung up on this one factor, right? great at page experience score is not going to magically shoot you up to the #1 spot on Google for everything. It's just one of the hundreds of factors that are used to rank sites. So Google has even said that they're going to be prioritizing pages with the best information. So even if some aspects of your page experience may be subpar, because it's gonna, at the end of the day, having that page experience does not override having the relevant content that your users are looking for.
Right. And I think that's it. Just keep it, everybody just keep everything in perspective. So page experience, speed is part of the page experience, but so are an awful lot of things. That is all the time we have for today. We hope that you'll tune into some of our other Tip Tuesdays. We have lots of them and a few webinars, like I mentioned, on the site, and a YouTube channel that covers a lot of in-depth things that we have talked about today. So Ivana, thanks for helping me out and sharing what you know with everyone, and hope you all have a great day. Bye.
Bye.